My name is Gunbei from Chibi. It's Nishan.
Everyone knows that.
Before we start this, we're not like experts on ad reviews. We're sharing our experiences and my thoughts.
So people who don't know.
So you'll probably know this, but Nishan's intern at Salesforce is now incoming UX designer at Salesforce, and I'm going to Facebook. So there's two types of app critics. So the first thing is you're doing as a part of a design challenge, and I know like Google has it, Uber has it, and some companies like Thumbtack also has it. So it's like they give you design prompts, like some kind of problems to solve, or it could be some kind of apps that they already picked before, like Yelp or something. You've probably seen a lot of like redesigns of Yelp or other apps that exist in like Medium or other places. So those are some of the like redesign of existing applications, and the other part is like an impromptu exercise. You'll probably sometimes the interviewer, it might not be in the interview process, but interviewers might be asking you like, hey, can you open up your phone and start, let's talk about this app. Or like, for example, when I interviewed with Facebook, we had an app critique session where you'll be asked to, Nishan's going to explain more detail, but your phone, what kind of phone you have, and what kind of app they're gonna start one app, and then maybe you can do more than one, but typically it's just one app. And
So the key difference between
Do they ever assume you have an app?
Uh,
Or do they ask you ahead of time to download it?
no, they will not tell you ahead of time. For the impromptu, they will generally ask you like, do you use Spotify? If you say yes, then they will tell you like, okay, let's go ahead, open the app, and even they will be using your phone, so you can actually tell them which screen to go to and
If you say
like
no,
show
do
them.
they judge you for not using it?
No, I
Not really.
personally, when they asked me to, the first question they were like, oh yes, let's do Yelp, and I was like, no, I don't even have Yelp on my phone. Like I'm not a user of Yelp. I was honest, and he was just like, okay, then let's do another app because it doesn't make sense. Like the interview is not going to be like you should install Yelp right now.
Okay.
But it can go other way as well. Like the interviewer can say, let's check out the onboarding experience for Yelp, and you download it right now,
Yeah,
and we
that's
can
true.
go ahead with it.
Yeah,
So it
that's
can
true.
go either way.
Yeah.
Cool.
So the example of popular apps, the reason is typically like the app you're gonna do an app critique on is gonna be like the popular apps like Google Maps, like Gmail. But if you're interviewing for Google, they might not be asking you for Google products.
Yeah.
Just like Facebook's not asking you for like Messenger, Instagram, or something like that. Spotify is pretty popular, and you can cross it with like SoundCloud. Yelp is a really popular one. You should know. Well, you can say what I did, but and Uber and Lyft typically not really, but because you have to like experience the ride sharing and like ordering the ride. LinkedIn, like Amazon, there's also like SlideShare, Slack. So basically the apps that are popular, but it doesn't really have to be popular because sometimes the interviewers might be asking you, hey, do you have this app on your phone? And it might be starting from there.
So key things to keep in mind for the apps. The company you are interviewing with, they will never choose an app that belongs to their company. Like Facebook will not tell you to like test Instagram, Oculus, or any other on their apps. And even if you're interviewing with Google, then they will not give you any of their apps. On the other hand, they will also try to avoid apps that have your personal data, like any messaging application or in terms like Facebook, which has a lot of personal data. They will try to avoid those kind of applications. And things like Yelp, Uber, Lyft, LinkedIn has like more common details, like Google Maps versus Apple Maps. Those are more kind of the common ones.
One side note, like when I did the interview for Google, they give you 3 prompts and you're supposed to come up with an app or something. And typically, it's a good idea to design with like Android or material design rather than just doing an iOS phone. Those kind of things you should.
Cool. So the process is pretty straightforward. First of all, you have to choose a phone. You have to choose a phone. Now, this generally happens during when the recruiter gets in touch with you. So if you select, like, go through the first round, and if you are in the second round, and the recruiter generally mentions next round would be like app critique, and they will ask you details like which phone do you own, do you prefer Android over iOS, or if the interviewer has a specific device in mind, he will let you know. If by any chance they do not mention, please do ask, because you don't want to be in a situation where you go on a call with an iPhone and the interviewer only has an Android, because generally for even for the same apps there are certain differences. So be clear to be mentioning and be clear about which phone you're going to use. Second is pick an app for the critique. For most situations, the interviewer will be picking the app for you, and it will not be known to you until you start the interview. And at the start of the interview, they will generally tell you like, okay, let's go ahead with this app. And if you don't have, so just be honest, like I don't use it, and they might switch to another one. Otherwise, they will like still go ahead with it, and then eventually you will do the critique. So now we'll start with how to do the critique and what do you start with. So as we have learned, we always start with the users. So regardless of both of you know and use Spotify on a daily basis, both of you know it's a music application, but it is still a good idea to always mention who are the users for the app or who are the intended or primary users, and eventually go into the secondary users. And the second thing to mention about why does the app exist, what kind of problem it is trying to solve. So again, the difference between the two types of critique sessions. The first one was where you get a design. It is a part of design challenge. In that, you will always be focusing on a particular problem that is given to you for the application, versus in the impromptu where the interviewer will not tell you which part of the app you have to critique. It's just the app, and you can probably go wild with any of their features. So instead of going into details first you should always mention like who's the audience, what is the problem. If we take example for Spotify, so the primary users for Spotify is any music enthusiast with an internet connection and a phone, versus a secondary user who can be any other music enthusiast who will like eventually pay for it and have the music offline as well. And what kind of problem it is trying to solve? So it is trying to solve the problem of like owning and managing your own music records. Instead, you just pay for subscription and you have everything. The second is you can start with is the app navigation. Now, for the app navigation, you generally go into details like what kind of menu structure is it using? Is it a hamburger icon versus a floating button versus a tab bar versus tabs that you can scroll through? Then you can comment about why do they have those. Like menu items generally, for if you use top tabs where you can just scroll through, those are like very limited options and you can just see like two or three. But a floating menu is generally used for like quick actions, versus a tab bar is used for like main menu items that you want to go to. Big apps like Amazon, they have tab bar as well as hamburger icon, because hamburger icon is like a dump of all the other things that you can do versus the important things you can do on the tab bar. So it is important to understand what does the app does, and what the type of menu style they are using, does it fit their style or the structure that they are using. Second is about information architecture. So you don't have to go into like quite in depth about what kind of information architecture you are it has. I mean, you don't have to draw or anything, but just to go into all the menu items. So once you start, you don't have to like start critiquing it right away. You can take a couple of minutes to check out the application and tell the interviewer, I'm just checking it out, let me just explore, and eventually I will start. So for the information architecture, you just try to see uh, inside each menu item what kind of details they are providing. So inside profile, I have my personal details as well as my Facebook link, Twitter link. So that is more like socialize and personal items in there, versus a discover menu item where you can search at the same time they give you recommendations, and try to build like a mental map of how things are laid out, and if something you think is not laid out correctly or something that should be repeated on multiple menu items, so you generally comment on those. Task flow is based on a very particular feature. Like again, in the interview, it can be as open as you just critique and interviewers listening. versus interviewer will tell you, okay, let's check out if you want to create a playlist and share it with your friend on Spotify, how will you go about that? Now that is a more dedicated task that you are doing, and generally for that task flow, then you start commenting on, okay, I don't see an option here. If I see an option, what are the things that make sense to you? What doesn't make sense to you? And eventually go with that. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, when I was interviewing for Facebook, I reviewed Spotify, and exactly
I did Spotify too.
I was supposed to like create a playlist, and I told my interviewer that like I don't really create a playlist. I just search for songs and then listen to it, or there's like browse like popular albums and stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's fine, but let's do it. Let's do it. So I started doing it, and then I just gave like it was like a think aloud kind of thing where I was like, hey, like I'm not finding this button. If I were to make it, or if I were to like modify it, I would just put it here because blah blah blah. So like it's not like I'm just saying it. I'm just saying with a backup reason, but it can't be just like you can't just stall for like 2 minutes. You have to have some kind of. That's why there's a lot of practice required in order to do these things, and a lot of times you have to just really sit down with your phone and practice. So that'll help.
Cool. Any questions on navigations, items, menu items?
Yes. So you're saying you can't just take 2 minutes to explore?
Well, you can, but like the interview, it typically is like 45 minutes, but there's like intro and there's conclusion, so it's like 30 minutes of after critic. So like you want to be able to show your 100% because the reviewers will probably like write stuff about you and then send it in. So like it's not like how much you say it will like it's like a success factor, but more likely like if you just try to think of something to like if you actually think of a word like for example you might not know what the button like it's a hamburger button, but you might not know what it's called. It's like instead of like just doing that, like try to find out some of the times that you can cut, and like just be. I think it's like a person to person thing. So like if you stall, it feels like you're like struggling. Like just.
So once you start, don't stall, but you can take minutes.
Yeah, you can. Like it's not like you can't stop, but like. It's better to just.
It's more like the reason I said that you can take your time to explore is when you are open, like the person just said, just let's start the critique and critique the app. It's like more open. You don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Right? Versus when they give you a particular task, it's good that you follow like our standard think aloud protocol. You just go with the steps, and for each step you mention what you see, what you don't see, what you understand, what you don't understand.
So like I'm not saying don't stop when don't stop when like say you're creating a playlist and you're supposed to like create it, but you're like you can't because you don't know where. That's the part where you actually say, hey, like I'm having a really bad user experience or something, but like.
And in this situation, knowing the right terminologies are also important. If for an icon, instead of a hamburger, you say 3 bars, that doesn't cut it because they are designers working in the industry and everyone needs to speak the same language. So knowing what the icons are called, knowing what the patterns are called is always a good habit. Cool. Any other questions? Awesome. So next, it's okay. I can just. Sorry. Yeah. So next is interaction. So interaction is more about when you start commenting on what kind of animations they are using. Now, animations can also include. Once you click on a button, how does it animate to change to something else that provides meaning, or for example, in an iPhone, like in the new gestures they have in iPhone X, once you try to scroll up and you close an app, it actually goes to the exact position they have, so you know where the app went to. So it's more like does the animation is providing some meaning to you, or what the animation is trying to tell you. So it's not about, oh, this is the animation, it's really cool, but it's also about the functional design, like why do they have it in the first place? Why can't it be just you click and it's closed? Why are they taking that additional minute or seconds to actually tell you give some meaning? Animations can also include micro interactions, like you click on a heart button, it bursts, which is just to provide like a pleasure or peace or a moment of like happiness. And don't like feel free to point out these details. If you open a particular section and you think like this illustration is really good, then just tell them. That also expresses like how you generally feel, rather than only thinking about very technically. You also share about, oh, this is something that is giving me a lot of enjoyment or pleasure while using this application. Like for example, if you might have used Yelp, Yelp on Android phones, if you open the hamburger menu and if you scroll down, there is a dinosaur that comes in and you scroll down, it goes down the elevator and then it dies and then you have to go back up. That thing is not in iOS, but that it is in Android. And that, like, they don't need to have it, but it's really fun to play with. uh, so small things like those are really cool. Second thing is about channel of interaction. So channel of interaction can be, um, is it just visual feedback, or are they giving some sound taps? Are they giving some vibrations? If they're giving, then why they are giving? What will you do if someone is using the phone in a silent mode? Then you cannot hear the taps. Do they have sufficient visual feedback such that that is like good enough and evident for telling you what the status of the screen is or what the application is? So generally for channel of interaction, you try to see like, okay, for sound, visual, vibrations, how are they used and what combinations are they used? Is one sufficient alone, or do you always use it in combinations with other? Gestures. So gestures is like one tap, two tap, swipe up, swipe down, left, right versus pinch. So you can just try to explore like what kind of gestures they have. That's probably it.
And also for like animations or like some interaction, like you said, like some like Yelp kind of cool thing.
Yes.
So you can actually make comments that those are the things that, like, as a designer, you feel like the company really values design versus just like engineering driven kind of thing. So those are some of the things you can mention, and like they're just going to be like, hey, I'm a designer too. Yeah.
Cool. So any questions?
For each slide, is it possible for you guys to walk through one same thing on an app, actual app, to sort of see how you guys are getting each of those?
Do you want to do right now?
If there is time.
We have time, but
We can just go through this slide first.
Yeah.
And then just like
Probably.
maybe.
There are some examples. I mean, if you
Yeah.
use Spotify, so generally when you start playing a song, it generally shows up in the bottom bar and it has an arrow. So once you click that arrow, it doesn't actually slides up because you can clearly see it's a different screen. But the animation, the way it disappears, it's just a bit of like 2 milliseconds. It just goes up till the half point and then it just disappears. But you get the feeling that the arrow actually worked and it opened, versus when you close it, it actually comes back down. So those kind of small animations that make you feel like, okay, I'm sliding up and down versus just opening it up.
So the point is, you're not supposed to memorize all these for different apps.
Exactly.
You're supposed to feel it while you're actually doing the critique. So like that's the thing. Like I told you about not stopping and just keep on talking. If it's just like small things, it's just like being able to catch those little things that are design related. So
Cool. UI design. So UI design. So since we started with like more structure and then interactions, and now we go into more details about the visuals, illustrations, and UI. So here the main thing is the design consistency. How is the design consistent across different sections of the app? If we can take an example, Spotify uses a lot of cards. You see like three different screens. The card sizes are different on each, but the kind of consistency that they are using is the same. Like you have a card, you have the title for the card, and more details following that. So that is something that they follow. Then all the subtitles are in bold white, and all the cards have like, though you have a title for each card, each card, the illustration of the card also has its name, like your mix, daily mix 1 versus global versus this is dance hits. So no one needs to actually read it, but they already see it in the illustrations. So if you see like the cards are quite different, but you feel that they are the same while using, you don't realize that there is much of a difference. So you kind of maintain like visual hierarchy. So the second point is typography and visual hierarchy. So in visual hierarchy, you again see like, okay, this is the home button. Under home button, this is like the main title, and then this is subtitle, and these are the descriptions provided for those. And how is the visual hierarchy laid out? Does it make sense? Like, does it tell you like which that this is one section, this is another section, and how much is the space between them to tell you exactly like which sections are which. And then one question that my interviewer asked me was like this information. So this is really good because I really like this section, because as soon as I open the app, the first thing it tells me, this is made for you. And it also tells me like how it is made. It's like get better recommendations the more you listen. So I know that it is built based on what I'm listening. So I know that this is something valid. This is something that that they really care what I'm interested in, and they are recommending. But the immediate question my interviewer had was like, what do you think about the visual style of it? Why is it grayed out versus white? And then you have to like think about it. Like maybe it's white because it's not that very important. So the contrast is low versus the background, and you don't want everyone to read that. But people who are reading it will know like what it is about, and it's providing you some meaning. So it's important to have like clear structure in typography to make sure that this is sans serif. So generally that is good for like screen design. Is it clear? What is the spacing? And those kind of things. And the last is color and brand identity. Generally, Spotify uses green color a lot, but over time, since the app started, they have converted everything from green to white. And there is a strong reason for it. Like initially, when I started using Spotify like 8 months back, I remember like these were green, and when you used to highlight this, right now it's white, but they were green. But now they are switching to white, and the only reason is they have a lot of bright illustrations in cards, and throughout the app, wherever you have these bright illustrations, you don't want to mix them up with any other color. So they are trying to keep all other sections as simple as possible. That is white, gray, black, and they are trying to everyone to focus on the illustrations and like let the illustrations do the talking rather than any other details. So over time they have switched from like green to white, and those are the things that you need to understand, like how they are using brand. One thing that is, again, they use green when they really want you to see something. So if I want to give you an example right now, let me just open Spotify. So on Spotify, when you are playing a song, you generally have, uh, okay, just a second. Okay, so when you are playing a song, there is a button down that says devices available. So if you're playing music on your phone, it just says white and the text says device available. Versus when you tap on it, it says the devices available are Nishant's Echo Dot and my MacBook Pro. And once I select that, it turns to green. Now it says Nishant's Echo Dot. So it's playing on my Echo. So even though I will change songs on my phone, it is still playing on my Echo. And now the color is changed to green. And my interviewer was like, now why do you think it is green versus white? And the simple reason is the green, like on this entire screen, the only thing green is this. And the contrast ratio is very high. So it wants to tell you that it is not playing on your phone. So eventually, there might be some situation where when I actually forgot that I changed it to my Echo Dot, and I keep on switching and start and pause, and the only thing it does is on my Echo, and I am confused like why is it not playing on my phone? And that's when it is like more contrast helps you understand like it's playing on your Echo Dot and not on your phone. So trying to comment like how color is providing value to what you are doing and what the app is trying to do is also valuable.
And also, like the usage of big pictures in like apps and websites are like a huge trend right now.
Yes.
And like if you go back to the Spotify thing, like when I was first asked to like critique the app that I first see, like you can actually see like the image, like the third image on the most left screen is like cut off, which means you can actually horizontally swipe. Versus like this one, you're not supposed to. So like those kind of things are also like related to what you actually visually see and stuff.
Yes.
And like to be honest, like interviewers don't really have answers to everything. They don't know everything. They're just like you. They might be more experienced, but the most important thing is you know the difference, and then you think of reason why. So yeah, that's
Exactly. So as you said, try to see what are the signifiers provided.
Yeah.
Like in this case, there's a clear signifier that you can scroll horizontally. Cool. All right.
So
Take it
user
away.
experience. So like it's pretty much what we so far talked about. So like it can be like a page view layout, just like I talked about, like swiping or like typography icon. So those are kind of UI elements, but all leads to UX. Like the total experience of the app. So like if the design is not consistent overall, like you might have a bad experience like visually at first, because like the visual thing is the first thing you see. And like the onboarding checkout experience, these are some of the things like onboarding, checkout, like playlist creating. So like you said, like task. So those are some of the things that you experience while you're critiquing the app, and then just commenting on, hey, like I feel like this button is at the wrong place. Like it's really hard to reach. For example, when I said Spotify, like I'm not supposed to drive while I'm search a song while I'm driving, but what I said was, if I'm supposed to tap on the search button, like I have to press the search bar, which is at the very top of the phone, which forces me to just move my phone, like move my fingers. So I was like, if I'm gonna search for songs, if I press on the search tab, like I just want the keyboard to just pop up so that I can start typing. So those are some of the reasons I provided.
Just to add to that, Spotify does a really weird thing. So when you tap on the center search icon in the menu, it just opens the search screen, and then you have to tap the top thing to actually pop up your keyboard and start typing. But there is a hidden feature. If you tap the search icon again, it will open the keyboard.
Oh.
And that is something that is buried, and no one knows about it, and I have no idea why did they do that. But pointing those out, when you will play around, you will always come across these kind of hidden features or features that you don't expect to them, like, but they are there. So if you try to like tap twice, it will actually open up.
That's so cool. Right.
That's something that's not discoverable.
Yes,
So,
exactly. So that is bad UX.
That
Like,
point is a good thing.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So able to do was intended on. So like if you're able to, so for example, like it's kind of simple, but like for Spotify, you're supposed to be listening to music, right? But like if certain apps, like maybe they're premature, maybe they are like really good apps, but like for Facebook, for example, it's such a big app with so many functions, and it's supposed to do a lot of things, but you might not know why, and there might be not like the best way to do it because they're A/B testing so many times and stuff. So like those are the things that you can experience before actually going to the app critique, or like during the app critique, and then just say out loud like I don't like this feature. I don't think this is making me do what I want within the short amount of clicks or short amount of taps or something, and it's just like unnecessary to see some of the information. It's just additional, and
All right. Any questions?
So we're gonna practice before the interview. So what if the interviewer is asking you to critique an app which you have practiced before? Do you pretend that you're actually using it for the first time?
No.
when the interviewer asked me to Yelp, and I was like, no, I don't use Yelp. The next one was Spotify, and like I was lucky because the night before until like 3 o'clock a.m. I was just I was just looking at Spotify like for 4 hours, and I was just like, oh, Spotify, like okay, fine, like I use it often, like, but I'm not a really heavy user, and I just started from there. Like I wasn't like thinking of doing that whenever, but it was just like happening like in my head. I was like, if I say, oh, I really love Spotify, then the interviewer might have like big expectations.
I mean, like, can you say that you haven't used Spotify before, and then you pretend to know it for the first time, which
As in all interviews, be honest. Say, oh, I actually have been looking at this recently, trying for reviews, so I have a lot to say. And they might say, oh, great, and you have a lot to say, and that's awesome. Or they might say, oh, well, since you've already done that, let's make a different app. You know, like. But either way, you want to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think so. It is going to work against you in any way. If you say like I've been using for like 6 months, that doesn't go against you, and that doesn't even like raises the power of expectations, because both of like even you don't know what the interviewer is expecting. Even the interviewer doesn't know what you're going to say. So whatever you're going to say, it's more of a discussion rather than like hardcore interview with question and answers, because generally whatever you say, they might have some follow-up questions, they might not. Sometimes you are just telling them and just you are prompting them like, do you have any questions for these? So I don't think so you need to worry about that.
They might forget like 5 minutes after that you are first time user or something like
Yeah.
that. It's just all about the conversation.
Cool. So next is business and scalability.
So this is pretty straightforward. Just like saying, what do you think Spotify or some kind of other apps would do in order to capture more users? For example, like for Facebook, like how are they gonna capture like teenage users, or like what's your idea? Like what would you change about it? Um, Also, like make current users to spend more money. Like it's kind of sensitive, but still like you have to think about the business aspects too. Some companies like user experience today don't really think about the business aspect. They're
Sorry.
focused on creating the better user experience, and it might go against the business aspect. So I heard some stories that collide with like the business people or like the CEOs or whatever. But but the trend, I think a lot of designers should think about how the business works and stuff. Also, some of the potential areas this relates to the business, like how are you going to expand it to like different countries? For example, Lyft is expanding to like Canada, like Toronto, the first place. Like what's your thought on like like thinking about like ethnography research or something like that? Just kind of like expressing the things that you would start doing as a designer, like even if it's not app focused, like some of the things that needs to be pre-worked before going into design. So stressing out that research is
Or
pretty important. And,
or
like,
maybe talking or commenting more on if you're using this app in India versus using an app in the US. How, like, based on your personal experiences, how do you think it might impact? Or it's like people in the US have this kind of personality and their way of life, and this is something that comes naturally, versus people in India might not be, like, it's a more learning curve for them rather than coming naturally. So try to comment on more like how do different people might use it in different countries or different situations.
Yeah, and like be really honest. Like since you're not interviewing for this like research role, although you should know some of the research that's conducted. Just be like some of the little things that happens inside the app critic are really important. Just like what would you do? And you say like, hey, research is pretty important, and I would do this. But versus like if you actually say like if I were to work with a UX researcher, like I would ask these kinds of questions. Like saying those kind of little things really like help during your interview.
Okay. Any questions? Cool. Moving ahead. All right. So that's more about how do you go about the critique. Now we'll talk a little bit about how do you prepare for critiques. Um, First thing is like start practicing. No second thoughts on that. Like download various apps, one app at a time. Don't download like 10 and start using 10 of them every day. Try to like focus on one for like a day or two. Try to use multiple features. If you use Yelp or use some Uber Eats, try to order once. Try to see how the experience is. Try to actually use the applications. Start using in daily life and take notes. So generally, whenever you are using, just take notes on your phone, very quick. Just use the keywords, because once you have the keywords there, you can go home and take like detailed notes. Because when you starting to use on a daily basis, there will be a lot of thoughts that come to your mind there in that context, but you might forget later on. So we don't want to forget. We don't want to be in that bad situation. Third is check with people around you and how they are using it. This is really, really valuable. So even though you are using it, your friends might be using it. Just ask them, how do you use it? What is valuable to them? I'll just give you an example of Yelp. So I was heading to Walmart with my friend, with my roommate. We were in Uber. We were just sitting there, and he uses Yelp pretty frequently. And I just asked him like, "What do you want to say about this screen on Yelp?" And he's like, "Ah." And it was like the menu screen. I think so. I might have a photo. Oh, this screen. So he started commenting, and he said like, I always prefer to go to restaurants that have a rating more than 4. And he's like, what about these restaurants? I was like, I don't know, I generally don't see them, or like they don't strike me. And then when I was like looking at details about why doesn't it strike him, I also saw like, if you see the color contrast, like red is like pretty evident versus orange versus yellow. So as the rating goes below average, it also changes the color to less contrasting colors. And less contrasting colors are like pretty hard to catch on your eye. So generally they are trying to avoid those. So it's not just about preferences, but it's also about how the colors are providing a meaning and how they are trying to focus on more highly rated applications. So just try to ask, like, are there any other use cases that your friends might be using for different applications?
Yeah, and just go on Google and say like every time the app is launched, there's so many people that gives feedback, like professional people or just like anyone. So like just like Spotify app review, and there's gonna be so many resources out there that you haven't discovered. And like the tap thing, like somebody might have discovered it, like you might have just uploaded it or something.
Yeah, it was an accident. I just clicked it and it happened. Second thing I would like to stress on is have your basics clear. These are very basic things like the Higgs law for the number of choices you provide, like 7 is the ideal and plus minus 2, 1 or 2. And then Fitts law for like distance and the spacing and how much time it takes for you to travel to different things. Whether these similar kind of actions are like grouped together, or if they are different, why would it take you more time to versus like handling your phone differently. So those kind of having those kind of, and then of course gestural psychology of like all these 7 principles they have, proximity and closure and how they are being used in the application. So try to have these basics clear and just try to apply those to the applications, how they are like structuring and how the grid is layout, those kind of things. Also be clear about the Nielsen-Norman design principles. Now those are like the 10 design heuristics that Nielsen and Norman has provided, and those are pretty basic, but trust me, they help you a lot. Like you should always provide a status. What is the system status? Are you providing feedback? If there is an error, how do you recover from it? So those things are very basic, but they're really helpful when you are trying to like critique an application. Also see what kind of platform standards and current trends they are providing. So Apple iOS versus Android versus BlackBerry, if anyone uses. So how are they different? How are the text sizes? How are the icon sizes? Are they round, square? Tabs versus the tab bar, floating button for Android. So try to know like what are the goods and bads of these platform standards and how are they utilized in the applications.
And some of the times they really don't follow sometimes of these things. So these are really, really important, but sometimes just be like, hey, like this actually goes against what I think should be something. So like it'll be curious to see what the research happened. Like it could be like some kind of data was, like applied or something.
Cool. Next is read app reviews. So as GB already mentioned, there are multiple ways you can read app reviews. First is you go to their app store. I am 100% sure there are like thousands of people providing feedback about things not working, things broken, things that don't align with their intention. And app stores are one of the best places to get reviews that are really short and very specific. Medium articles are more about students like us who do side projects and like fun things, and then they publish articles on it. Then they generally follow like various structures. Actually, I might just have a few examples up here. Let me just open these up. If this allows me to, wow. Okay. App critique. So this is like app critique for Quora, and you can just see like what the users like, what the users don't like. So generally for most of these small articles people write, generally they start with research where they talk with like 5 to 7 users. So these are not like you have to follow them blindly or you have to trust them, but you might find something that you personally have not found on the app or something that you have not thought about. And reading a lot of those, so this is one article on Core. I'm pretty sure you will find a lot of them. So generally see what are they focusing on, what problem are they solving, how are they restructuring. So the normal structure, it starts with research, problem, users, how did they change it, why did they change it, and the final result. So just check out what are they doing, and this is the detail page, and eventually I'm pretty sure they will end up with like content recommendation, like these are the recommendations I'm providing, this is what I changed. So try to see what they are doing, why they are doing this, like Slack app critique, and then you see like what they are doing on Slack. So even I think so if you just, so I don't know if you know, like Facebook design team actually does critique sessions officially. So it's like anyone can submit like an application or a project that they are working on, and you can request for feedback from them. And if they are interested, they will schedule like a 30-minute call with you where 5 designers from Facebook sit with you and give you feedback. And that's like an actual critique session, and those are like free and like voluntary. So there are like I know a couple of people who have posted on Medium their entire experience of how those sessions went. So you can read more about how designers think and how to start and what do you expect from those kind of critiques. Tweets and Facebook page are like an extension. If you have time, just go through them. Not really important, but generally now we are in a trend where if any customer has any complaint, they won't send an email. They will rather tweet or write it on Facebook. And like I know companies are very active on responding on Twitter at least because now it has become like the next customer engagement thing. So generally, you might get some genuine feedback. Anything? Cool.
So this is really important. This is really helpful for especially like students. So practice with friends. So you can just set a time together, like 45 minutes or 30 minutes, and then just ask questions. Like one person be an interviewer, one person be a person is being interviewed. You like if you just like switch back and forth, or while you're saying, you'll have like plenty of chance to like see other perspectives. So like what other people like have in mind. It could be like from the app reviews too, but like actually sitting down together, actually like talking about the app like for like 30 or 40 minutes really helps. I did that with my wife before I was interviewing. Also like take notes on that, like some of the findings and some of the user experiences or like some like thoughts on the UI that you have never thought about will be easily discovered from doing this. So this is really important to do.
Any questions? Cool. And I think yeah, we are done. We don't have a thank you screen.
Thank you.
Sorry, we don't have a thank you screen, but thank you. All right. Cool. So yeah.
Are we ever asked any other things to critique apart from apps? Like
Apart from
apart from apps?
What do you
Like
mean? Like
perhaps,
websites.
I mean, or something which other.
I have heard a couple of friends from mine like who it was really random, so they weren't expecting. And the interview just said like open this website and tell me what do you think about it. So websites are more like impromptu or that you cannot expect, so and it can be anything, versus special app critique sessions during your interview is like one part of your interview that is 45 minutes dedicated to app critiques. So whatever we covered today is more helpful for those, like how do you prepare for those, but most of the general things can be applied to those as well, like knowing your basics and the standards and knowing the web trends, what are going on. You can easily critique on those, like typography, color, structure.
So
Yeah.
if you have an app review session like Facebook does, so it's dedicated to app reviews,
Yeah.
which means the interviewer has to provide the feedback to the hiring managers. So they have the obligations to answer, like ask some of the questions and answer. Like if you're like sailing through and then some of the things that they randomly like pick out, they might be prepared, but like realistically they're like industry professionals and they're sparing their own time to do interviews. So like they might not be prepared or they might be. So like it's really depend on who your interviewer is and what
Yeah.
kind of question they want to ask. Sometimes they want to mix it up. They want to like suddenly jump into another app or something like that. So it's really random.
But it's mostly just apps and websites, right?
If it has like a dedicated app review, but sometimes I know for Salesforce when I did it, the person was like can you just open LinkedIn right now and then let's talk about it. So like it's really random if you don't really have that app review session
Yeah.
ready.
But if it's an app critique session, then it's
Yeah.
only apps.
Yeah.
Question: have you ever done in a remote phone or video call or
Oh.
in person? Or
I missed that.
Video,
Yeah, it is a video call.
Video call.
So generally, most companies might use some WebEx or other kind of systems. Facebook has their own internal system,
Blue Jeans.
Blue Jeans. So generally, they give you a link and then you talk. So that's why like the interviewer will have their own phone. And when you mention like if you can go to the search section, so they will exactly they will trying to sync it up.
Yeah.
But you are free to, like most of the times when you're providing feedback about animations and stuff, so you can just roll over to your camera and tell like this is what I'm talking about. So those
Yeah,
kind of
But
interactions.
sometimes Sometimes, like for internships, you mostly have no on-site. It's just like video calls. That's it.
Yes.
But like for on-site, you'll sometimes like the interview. It depends on the interviewer. Some people might open up the website together or like critique the app together. So
Just want to quickly say thank you before I leave. I have to go to class. Thank you, JB and Nishant. IxDA really appreciates you spending your time to share your experiences with us. And thank you all for attending.
Thanks to Lilia for booking the room. Cool. So, any other questions, or if you want to know anything about our personal experiences or any other thing you want to talk about? Yeah.
How do you structure like the critique? Do you just go randomly?
Stream of consciousness.
Like I noticed this, I noticed that, or you try to like go from UI design to UX and then like talk about like business at the end, or you.
So, okay. Generally, when you start the app critique, as I mentioned, that you generally start with your users. That's the first thing because it applies to the entire application and the problem they are trying to solve. So it's not specific to a particular feature, screen of the application, but it is for the entire application. And generally, you do not have to structure it like UI. Now I'll be focusing on UI. You will go to all screens and only comment about UI. That is not something I would recommend. You go screen by screen, and for each screen, you talk about everything: the user interactions, UI, structure, typography.
whatever you see and whatever you think is good and bad.
Yeah.
Express
So,
it.
except for what doesn't
So it's
apply.
random.
Sorry.
So it's random basically.
It's not random. Like you can have your own.
Yeah.
Like the way I prepared, I generally prepared in the way of the 5 stage of UX process, where you start from structure to the UI, right? And I generally follow that. Like I follow with how is the grid laid out, what are the signifiers provided, versus are the logically similar functions are together. Like if I'm in the browse section, do I have all the recommendations and then I have like podcast and other options? Are those like grouped together? And then I will go into more towards animations, and then I will go into more towards UI. What illustrations are they providing? So you can have your own mental structure of how you want to comment on anything, basically.
Yeah, and sometimes the interviewers will ask you questions.
Exactly.
And like you'll have a sense of what this person like values the most. Like and like by you'll have the names so you can search on LinkedIn like what kind of background this person has. Like, I don't know, like do something like that, or like just you can actually feel like you're supposed to say these kind of things, and then like for other things you could just express. I like this bold font that contrasts with something, and it's just like the pictures and everything. Just like say it and then say why, and like the interviewer might ask you why.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they have a lot of follow-up questions based on what you have. Just like when we do like presentations, like people ask questions and you just keep on answering them.
So for example, I was commenting on the search screen, and I was talking about like I have to go up and tap, and then they have this hidden feature of double tapping the search icon, and then she's like, okay, why do you think search is in the center of the tap bar? Across 5 options, why search is in the center? And then I was like, okay, let's think. Probably because it's easier to reach. It's like the main feature to search, and it's in the thumb arc, and my thumb can easily reach on the search, and I can easily tap twice and start typing versus going up.
Yeah.
So trying to provide the business value, like also you can mention things about, I don't know, like you might have more analytics towards how many people search and browse versus how many people directly go to a particular song or friend's playlist. Might be search has the highest number of hits, that's why you have kept it in the center. So it's like it provides more business value for
So
searching the song.
you won't have the right answer
Exactly.
to the thing.
The-
It's just like because people who actually worked there probably had a lot of A/B testing, so that they settle on this, and then still it might have problem, right? So like so like you just have to say why you
Right.
think.
You think, exactly.
Yeah.
Like if you're making assumptions, just let them know. Like I'm assuming that it might have the most hits, and that's why it's
Yeah.
in the center.
Yeah.
Try to provide your rationale behind whatever the reason you have.
But they always give like a tasks with you, right? They don't just ask you like.
No, mine was pretty open. It was like
Depends.
open the app and start
Yeah,
critiquing,
yeah.
and
So,
then they had follow-up
Yeah,
questions.
that's the hardest. That's the
In
hardest.
that case, like, should you just go to the app or should you be like,
Just
okay,
keep talking, and then the interviewer will suddenly ask questions.
or should you be like, oh, I'll open Spotify and let me create my own playlist and let me see how that goes. Should you
That's up to you if you want to
Yeah.
dedicate your session to only creating
But like if you
playlists.
suddenly open Spotify and say, "Hey, let me create a playlist," and everyone's like,
no.
"Did you prepare?"
If your interviewer doesn't explicitly tells you to do a task,
Yeah.
don't commit to it.
Okay.
Like you can commit, but probably later on towards like you have covered most common sections, then like, oh, I don't have anything common. Maybe I can create a playlist and comment on that. Let's see how the
So like,
task
if
goes.
you're done with the first homepage, like do you then
Switch to
start
other
doing
sections,
random
yes.
stuff and
Yeah, it
oh,
depends
let me
on
check
the-
this out and then
Depends on what the interviewer wants you to do. Like you can
Yeah.
go from tab to tab, or you can actually do like a flow, or you can start like the interviewer might be starting to ask about more about UI or whatever.
Yes.
I had experience with this. So I was critiquing Medium in one of my interviews. That was a pretty open one. So I started with user needs. So I said, there's like readers and then there are readers. So I divided like the user groups to two groups. And then for readers, I said, the users need to first, they need to discover something to read. So that relates to search. And then they need to like actually read. So that is like the reading experience. And then there's interaction between between the readers and the writers. So there's like engagement. So then I started with the first one, how they discover new articles to read. There's search, there's recommendations, and then like I structure my critique in like around the user needs. And then the interviewer, like she was very interested in like listening to the following part of it. So yeah. So I don't start it with like empty screen. I started with home. I think that is pretty hard.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
That's the hardest part.
So I talk about like I try to like summarize the user needs or problems.
Yeah. I mean, that's why a lot of companies are like educating interviewers too, like so that they can extract like 100% out of candidate, and
These are really subjective. Like there are less objective questions in here. I mean.